This tutorial will walk you through the step-by-step process of creating NFL daily fantasy projections using only the fantasydata.com Premium Plus membership. The end product will result in weekly projections that you control and, more importantly, understand. The projections will consider each player's on-field performance, the projected pace of the game that week, and the opponent that they are facing. You will only need a very basic understanding of Excel, and we will only use a handful of simple formulas. If you'd like to follow along and build the same projections document that I have here before you purchase your Premium Plus subscription, you can find the supplemental project files and final projections document on Fantasy Data within the article that is hosting this video. Once completed, it should only take you a few minutes to update on a weekly basis to generate your new projections. Let's do it. All you're going to need to complete these projections is a blank Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. All of the formulas and things that we do are also available on Google Sheets, so you can use that too. And then you'll just need a subscription to fantasydata.com and the Premium Plus membership. If you'd like to use the promo code RickRunGood, it'll actually give you 20% off that Premium Plus membership. So again, that is Rick, RickRunGood, Rick Run Good, all one word, for 20% off your Premium Plus membership. And what's nice about having all of this information in one spot is that we're not going to have to do much data manipulation at all because of the way that we're able to get access to the fantasy data. We're going to be able to do this fairly easily, and I've earmarked 5 pages on fantasydata.com that we are going to use to be able to formulate these projections. The first one is NFL daily fantasy salaries. Then we have NFL snap counts data. Then we have NFL team rankings. We also have NFL team stats. And for the odds, we have NFL point spreads. Now, all of these can be found in the NFL navigation on fantasydata.com. That's it. Those 5 pages are what we're going to use to generate essentially everything within this projection model on a week-by-week basis. So what I want to do first is I just want to start getting these 5 pages into Microsoft Excel. And then once we have all the data in there, we will start manipulating it and getting it into the right places and calculating everything. But I just want to start getting it all into our spreadsheet first. So I'm going to start with the salaries page, and at time of recording this, we are through week 1, and we have had 1 game of week 2, the Thursday night game. So every team has played once. There are 2 teams that have played twice, so keep that in mind. And then obviously, as the season goes along, these projections will continue to get better and better because we will have more and more data. So I'm here on the Fantasy Data NFL Daily Fantasy Salary page, and I've got all the salaries in here for any site that I want for week 1, week 2. I can do multiple weeks, but I'm just going to focus on 1 week at a time. So I'm going to go on week 2. I want to change my fantasy scoring to whichever of these fantasy sites I like. We can do it for all of them. The process is going to be the same. I'm just going to choose DraftKings just for the purposes of this tutorial. But if you play on Fanduel or on Yahoo and you want to go that route, it's going to be the same exact process. I'm just going to use DraftKings to make sure that everything is uniform. And then there is actually more data than we kind of need here. So I'm just going to change our position to just be the offense. I don't need the IDPs or anything like that. I just really want quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. That is going to do it for us this time. And then this little button over here, the download button, I'm going to click that and ask for the data in a CSV format, comma separated values. This is going to be the easiest way to just copy and paste. That's all we're going to do. We're just going to copy and paste. We're not having to consume an XML feed or a JSON feed. It's just going to be the raw data. So when I click download CSV, this is going to download right here in my browser. So you can see that down here in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to open this up, and it'll open up a new spreadsheet for me with the data from fantasydata.com. And all I'm going to do, you can see week 2, name of each player, their team, their opponent, opponent rank, position rank. We'll talk all through all of this. I'm literally just going to copy and paste all of this into my spreadsheet. And the reason I might not use all of this data, but I don't want to start removing columns now, trying to decide which to copy, which to paste. We're just going to copy and paste everything each week so that the spreadsheet that we're working on always knows how many columns we're going to receive. All of the data is going to be there. If we use it, great. If not, that's fine. But it's a lot easier to just copy and paste everything and deal with it later. So I'm just going to select all of this, right? So I can do this a couple ways. I can just drag down to the bottom here. I'm going to do Control C, which is a copy, and I'm just going to paste it into a tab here on my spreadsheet that I'm working through. And I like everything centered, so I'm just going to format this a tiny little bit. And then what I'll do is I will rename this tab Salaries, because that makes sense to me. And then I like to change the color of this tab. You can do this, you cannot. I just like to change the color to know a yellow tab is one that I have to update the data on each week. And by updating that data, simple, copy and paste. All right, so we are done with this salaries tab, or this salaries sheet for this week, so I can just close that out. I don't need that anymore. What I am gonna do before I forget, I want to hang on to this URL. I always just want to make sure that I have it handy. That way I'm not always looking for it. I could just bookmark this into my favorites, or what I could do is I could just copy this. And what I'll actually do is over here, I'm just going to put a little spot for a link, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to hyperlink this. Just like that. Just so that I have this link always handy. I don't need to always go searching for it. If I'm in my sheet and I need to access it, I can do it quickly. That's a little lesson I've learned over the years. Just always keep your URLs handy. All right, so let's continue on here, and we're going to go to the next page on fantasydata.com. This is the snap counts. And what we're going to use this for, there's a lot of really important things and really great things on this page here. First of all, it has every player's snaps that they've played, snaps per game, and snap percentage. That's important. You know, having a player who's only on the field 39% of the snaps is a lot different than a player who is on the field for 79% of the snaps. You can't score fantasy points from the sidelines, right? You've got to be out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the snap count information and the percentage and the snap share percentage to try to determine how many snaps a player is going to get in a game each week based on the pace. That's really important. Some teams play faster, some teams play slower. And then fantasydata.com actually does a lot of the really nice work for us, kind of in a basketball sense, right? You know, basketball has, per 100 possessions or per 36 minutes. This column right here, fantasy points per 100 snaps, is beautiful. So if Dalvin Cook played 100 snaps at his current pace, he'd earn 72 fantasy points. That's obviously going to come down over the course of the season. He's only played one game, but really, really important information and critical based on how we want to project out these players. So again, I'm going to use DraftKings over here on the right. I'm going to limit this to, say, you have to have at least 20 snaps per game. I can lower this down and say guys who play 5 snaps a game, and then you start to see some really wonky numbers, right? Jordan Howard only played 9 snaps, so his numbers are through the roof here. And, you got some guys that you probably want to filter out and at least try to protect the sample size out of this. So I'm going to stick with the 20 snaps per game. I have offense chosen. Again, I don't need to do this by individual defensive players. I'm just going to go with offense, and then I'm going to download this CSV as well. Goes right into my browser, and we're going to do the same exact thing here. We are just going to copy all of this over. Okay, so I'm just going to copy all of these columns into my projections sheet, and I'm going to add a new tab called Snap Counts. And I'm just going to do Control V and paste that in. Again, I like to make sure that these are centered. Looks nice to my eye. I know I had mentioned using NFL team rankings, but now that I'm thinking about this, I don't think we're going to need this one. I'm actually just going to pass on team rankings for now. If we need it, I'll come back and get it. But I'm going to go straight to team stats here. And I can do this a couple of different ways. I can get the offense or I can get the defense data. And I'm actually going to use the defense because that's going to allow us to accomplish two things at the same time later. So I'm not only getting the full list of team names, which is going to be important. You'll see that in a second. I'm not only getting how many plays they've played, but I'm also going to be able to get the defensive stats so we can use that as a weight later when we get to actually calculating the percentages. So I've got 2020 regular defense, and we are going to export this to a CSV. And we're going to do the same thing that we have done each time so far. So I'm going to just copy and paste into a new tab and call this Team Stats D for defense. And while I'm thinking about this, and so that I remember, I want to grab the URL as well. So we'll put this link in. So we will just paste in the team stats into our team stats D column. And again, I will format this a little bit differently. And then I'm going to put the link down here. And the reason I can put it down at the bottom is because we're not getting more teams. You know, the numbers will change, but I'm not going to be adding rows here throughout the season. So we can get rid of that. I can take this URL, just copy it in here, make sure to hyperlink this and have it. And I don't think I did that for snap counts. So before I forget that, I will also put the snap counts link just over here so I have it handy. Again, just trying to make my life easier a little bit later. So we'll copy that and paste it in right here. I promise you this will come in handy. It is worth spending the 1 second to do right now. Okay, so I've got, I think I've got one more left to do here. So we've done snap counts, we've done team stats. Let's just do point spreads. And this one, so this is going to be the most complicated one. We'll talk about it later. There's a lot of data here. There's a lot of ways that we can extract it. So I'm just going to do regular week 2 and just download this as a CSV. You'll see this is going to be a pretty sizable export here. And you'll see because there is not only the opening information, which is right here, what everything opened at, but you also have your consensus data, which is what we are going to use. But if you really wanted to, you could just use the DraftKings odds, the Fanduel odds. What else do we have here? Sugar House, PointsBet, Unibet. I mean, it's up. There's so much here. Now, again, I don't, even if I'm not using 95% of this, I don't want to start selecting columns right now, right? I just want to take everything and we'll deal with it later. That way, each and every week, we are just going to copy and paste the entirety of this export file into our spreadsheet and we don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to copy all of these. I'm going to take it back to my projections and I'm going to call this odds and we're going to paste it in. Okay. There we go. So I've got salaries, snap counts, odds, team stats. Oh, and I want the link for this. So before I forget, I'm just going to take the link down here. I can put it here because we're never going to have, 40 games in a single week. So we'll put it down here. And I've got my link handy. So I basically already have all of the data that I'm going to need to create these projections is in the spreadsheet, which is great. I only want to do one more step in preparation for this. And if you've ever tried to do projections before or even work in Excel, sometimes you'll see the teams be designated by their abbreviation, and sometimes you will see them designated by their nickname. And that can cause issues. So what we're going to do is we are going to create one essentially file, one tab on this spreadsheet that is going to allow us to use either the team name or the abbreviation. Again, this will come in handy later, but I'm going to do it now so that I just have everything done and we can start doing the projection. So I'm going to create a new tab and I'm going to call it teams. Then I'm going to come over and I'm just going to grab all of the team names. Here's all 32 teams. I'm going to paste them in and I'm going to sort them alphabetically. That is just so that I have them handy. You don't actually have to sort them alphabetically for any other reason than I think it's going to be easier to do. So now I've got all 32 teams in here and I just need to match up their abbreviation. So I'm going to create a new column, call it abbrev or abbreviation, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to go to, let's say odds here. And I'm just going to grab these odds. Okay. The two columns, home and away, just so that I have handy the abbreviations, and I'm going to cut them and bring them back into our team tab. Now I'm going to have to do a little manual process here. And there's probably a better way to do this, but honestly, I'm only going to do this once a season. So I'm okay spending the 2 minutes to go through and say, okay, the 49ers, that's San Francisco. Let me cut that and put that here. And Chicago is the Bears. And Cincinnati is the Bengals. And Buffalo is the Bills, right? This is what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to take a minute to do this. Again, I'm only doing it once throughout the year. So it's not a big deal. And the reason that I'm copying and pasting them instead of just guessing on them is, you know, Jacksonville. Is Jacksonville JAX or is it JAC? You know, obviously it's on fantasydata.com. They're always going to be the same, but some sites, you know, might use different abbreviations. So I don't want to guess and just try to type them in. So I'll do Chargers. And let me make sure I get these right, because you really want to make sure you get these right. If you copy and paste these wrong, it will throw off everything. So Miami Dolphins, I should probably focus a little bit more. Atlanta Falcons. Here's the Giants. While I'm here, I'll do the Jets. Detroit. I'm just cutting and pasting. That's all I'm doing. GB. You could type them in manually if you wanted. Carolina. Where's our friends, the Patriots? Okay, so maybe I missed a couple. Let's do Ravens. Let's do Steelers. Let's do Tennessee Titans, Minnesota Vikings. So I'm missing a couple here. Let me see. So the reason I'm missing some is because those odds might not be out yet, right? I use the odds to do this, but there's a couple other ways I can do it. So I can just check on, I don't know, salaries, for example, and I can just see what the correct abbreviations are. Okay, so New England is obviously NE, so that's fine. We'll do NE. The Raiders, they're LV for Las Vegas. The Saints are NO. Presumably, Baltimore is BAL. That's easy enough. Seahawks have to be SEA, and the Texans have to be Houston. Okay, so there's your abbreviations. Now, the other thing I'm going to do, this is like a little, I don't know, expert thing, is the way we're going to do some of these formulas, I want the team name on both sides of the abbreviation. So what I actually want it to look like is this. I want every team name in column A, their associated abbreviation in B, and their team name again in C. You will see why that makes sense later, but this is a good way to set it up right now. Again, tab color is yellow, and actually, no, this shouldn't be yellow. It should be red, because I should not have to change this again for the rest of the year. I don't have to change this on a weekly basis. It's never going to change. But these other ones, the yellow ones, these are the ones that I'm going to want to change on a regular basis. But now we're basically ready to start building the projections. Now we're ready to start bringing the data into the tabs that we want, bring in the calculations that we want, and actually start projecting this stuff. We've already got the foundation very quickly because of how easy it is to export all of this. All right, so let's do this. Let's create our projections tab, and we are going to generate weekly projections for DraftKings, for daily fantasy, or whatever site you're playing on, whatever site you've pulled your data for. And I'm just going to change this to green because I like to keep all my stuff formatted. And the easiest place to start here is to just pull over the salaries. And what I want to do is I want to pull over columns B, C, D, E, and F, which is the player's name, team, position, the week that we're in, and their opponent. We could pull over more, but I don't think it's necessarily worth it. We have other ways to get this data. For right now, I want you each week to copy and paste in columns B through F. And the way that I'm going to remind you that these are the columns that you need is I'm going to change the background color just to something a little bit darker, just so that it's gray. And I'm going to put a left border and a right border on it. So that to me says, okay, these are the columns that I need each week to take from the salaries tab over to the projections tab. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight all of these. I am going to copy them, Control C, and I am going to paste them into A1. And I like to paste them just the values only, which means you're not pulling over the formula or the formatting, excuse me, so that it just looks like this. And I have very clean data. I'm going to format this myself later. So I like it just like this. And then we've got to start bringing over some of those other pieces of information that we have, like what's his salary, for example. So the way we're going to get his salary is I'm going to add it here in F, and I'm going to call it salary. And if you've never, we're going to use a VLOOKUP. And if you've never used a VLOOKUP, essentially it's called a vertical lookup. It's just going to try to find something that you tell it in another range of your spreadsheet. Okay, so I want to tell Excel to go to the salaries tab, look for Lamar Jackson's name, and when you find Lamar Jackson's name, I want you to return me his salary. That's the question I'm going to ask Microsoft Excel, and it's going to answer for me. And these VLOOKUPs are important because we are going to use VLOOKUPs a lot. Okay, I'm like the VLOOKUP king. I love it. I think they're very easy. I think they're handy, and I think it gets the job done. So let's do one. We'll take the first one very slow, and we'll do them quicker as we go here. So the formula is equals VLOOKUP right here. And we're going to tell it the lookup value. Well, the lookup value for us is Lamar Jackson. So he's in A2. And I want to say, okay, go look for Lamar Jackson, comma, and go look for him on the salaries tab. So I'm going to click over to the salaries tab. And I want you to look for him in this range from B all the way over to I. So I can highlight this whole thing. I can select this whole thing, right? And the way it's reading right now is it's going to look for Lamar Jackson, who is A2, in the salaries range of B2 to I-20. That's this green section that's being highlighted right now. It's going to look for him in that range. And if it finds him, I need to tell it what to return. And in this case, it's the column number that I want it to return. So this being the first column, B being the first column is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I want it to return the 8th column if it finds Lamar Jackson. So I'm going to do comma 8, comma false. We want an exact match. We don't want an approximate match. So if I've done this correctly, what it should do in our salaries field over on the projections tab is pull up 8,200, which is Lamar Jackson's DraftKings salary. And it does. Okay, perfect. Now, the only issue that I have here is I've limited my range to that B2 to I-20. It's this one right here. This is the only range that I told it to look in. So when I start dragging this formula down and it doesn't find a player who's in that 20-person range, it's going to give me an error message. So what I'm actually going to do is just change this to be B. I'm going to take the 2 out and I'm going to take the 20 out. So I'm just saying B through I. So I'm saying go look for Lamar Jackson anywhere in this range of B to I, which means anywhere on the list. So this week I have 770 players for it to look through, but maybe next week there's 800, or maybe next week there's 500, and we start getting bye weeks and stuff like that. The number of players is going to change, so I don't want to have to worry about changing the range every single week. I'm just going to say go look through B and I, because I always know that my player name is going to be in column B, and my player's salary is always going to be in I. So I can do right here B through I, return column 8. I can drag this down all the way down, and I've got salaries for every single player. Boom. We've already got that part. Now, I guess it doesn't matter what order you start doing these in, but we just need to start pulling over more data onto this sheet so that we can start making projections. So I think the next one that I want to do is probably snap share. I want to know how much time my player is spending on the field. So we'll call this snap percentage. And just to actually, we can do a couple of these. So we'll do snap percentage. We're going to have to figure out how many snaps our team usually has. We're going to have to figure out how much the opponent usually has. We'll do fantasy points per snap. And then I think we'll be able to do projected points, projected value, and we'll go from there. So let's start with these ones. So snap percentage, well, we have that, right? And we're just going to do another vlookup. So, hey, vlookup for Lamar Jackson, but this time go look for him on the snap counts tab and go look for him. And when you find him, I want his snaps played percentage, his column H. So return column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That number right there. That's what I want you to return. So B through H, 7 false, if you're following along. So again, it's going to go look for Lamar Jackson in this range from B to H. When it finds him, it's going to return the 7th column. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It should return 89.8. And it did. Perfect. And again, we can just double click this and have it go all the way down. Beautiful. Dak Prescott's played 100% of his snaps. Yeah, that makes sense. So now I have snap percentage. Excellent. Now what I need is to figure out how many snaps do the Baltimore Ravens average per game, right? That's really what I want to know. That way I can determine, I can use that information and I can look at what the opponent paces, how many snaps does the opponent have, and figure out a general idea of how many snaps we're going to get in the game this week. Because if you put two paces together, average them out, usually that's how many plays are going to be run in that game that week. Now, I'll warn you, this is probably the most complex column that we're going to do here because there is not an average team snaps column. I'm going to have to do a couple of calculations. And also, I'm going to have to determine how many games each team has played. Okay, so bear with me on this column H here. This is probably going to be the most complex column that we do. So for team snaps, I'm going to use the information from team stats here. But now that I'm thinking about this, I brought over the defensive information, which is going to come in handy. I think I'm going to need the offensive information too. So I need to do one more tab down here at the bottom. So luckily I have this link handy. So we'll just go through and click that. And I'm just going to change it to offense. I want the offensive numbers. And I'm going to download this as well because it has my plays information. Okay, cool. So I'll download this, pull this up, team stats, and it should look pretty similar. Yeah, okay, great. And I'm just going to copy this into a new tab here, and we'll call it team stats O. I could have probably tried to do this with just the defensive numbers, but I don't think that would have been as good. So we're going to use the offensive numbers as well. So we're going to use both of them, but for the team snaps, the pace, I think we've got to use offense here. So there's a couple of things we're going to have to work through, and I mentioned this is going to be the most complex version of the most complex formula that we do. And the reason for that is I want to go look up how many plays the Baltimore Ravens run. And on this table, on this sheet, I can't just do a VLOOKUP because BAL, Baltimore, that's the abbreviation. If I go to team stats offense, it's listed by team name. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of work, but that's why I set up this teams chart here. So here's what we're actually going to do. We're going to do a nested VLOOKUP, which is a bit more complicated than maybe it sounds, or maybe it sounds more complicated than it actually is. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a lot of steps here. So we're going to do a VLOOKUP for Baltimore, for BAL, in our teams column here. So go look for BAL, and when you find it, return column 2, B to C, return column 2. So it should come back with Ravens. Great, perfect. It did exactly what it needed to do. Now, use Ravens as something, as the part of my VLOOKUP that I want to go find. So watch this. We're just going to do a VLOOKUP outside of this. And we're going to say for our lookup value is actually the other VLOOKUP that we just did, which is Ravens. That's the result that came back. So now it's going to go look up Ravens in whatever table array that we tell it to. For this purpose, it's going to be team stats O. And we're going to say, okay, go look for Ravens here in A through A, 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess we just need plays. A through D. Yeah, let's do that. A through D. And when you find it, return 4. And then we should close this up. And if I did this correctly, it should return me 58. And it does. Okay, so that's kind of a cool little thing. It went and looked up BAL, found Ravens, then used Ravens to go look up how many plays the Ravens have run. 58. Now, that's all fine and dandy until you get to bye weeks or teams that have played more than one already, because those team snaps is not an average. This is a running count. That is why the Browns and the Bengals are over 125 already, because they've played 2 games. So we need to actually figure out how many games these 2 teams have played, or all teams have played, I guess is the way I should be putting it. And it doesn't say anywhere, hey, the Browns have played 2 games, the Bengals have played 2. But what it does have is it has their score, which is how many total points they've scored, and it has their points per game. So using that, we will be able to determine how many games each one of these teams have played. And it might not matter, in week 16 when everybody's had a bye week, or 17, everybody's had a bye week, and all the numbers have shaken themselves out. It probably doesn't matter, but it matters a lot now. It matters a lot early in the season. So here's what we're going to do. We need to divide the total score by the points per game to determine how many games, these teams have played. So let's do it like this. We're going to do a very similar thing here. So we are going to do, I'm just going to put it over here in this column just so we can have a look at it. I'm going to do a VLOOKUP again for Baltimore. So I have to go change their team name to Ravens. So go look for Ravens in our B to C. When you find it, return column 2, right? So should say Ravens. Okay. So now we're going to do another nested VLOOKUP, same thing we just did. So go look up Ravens in team stats O, and when you find them, return the score. So A to C, return number 3, column number 3. That'll return the total number of points that the Ravens have scored this season. Okay? Perfect. So now I want to divide that by the second column, which is points per game. And if you do that, it should tell you how many games they've played. So I'm actually going to copy and paste this whole thing, divide by it, but I want to tell Excel to do this side first, do the entirety of this side first. So put those in parentheses, then do the entirety of this side and then divide them. And the other thing is this right here, this A to C column 3, this was pulling over the total number of points scored. Now I want to change it to pull over the second column, which is the points per game. And if I've done this correctly, this should say 1. And it does, which is excellent. Now, if I drag this down, you'll see there should be a 2 on here. Yeah, there we go. Baker Mayfield at 2. And Joe Burrow should be at 2 if I go a little bit further. And he is. So we've done this right. So now the last thing that we have to do is take this formula in column N that I was just using as kind of a placeholder and attach it to what we're doing here in column H so that we can get the average number of plays run by each team. How about that? So I'm just going to copy this entire formula from N, and I'm going to go to H, and I'm going to, again, tell Microsoft Excel, do the entirety of this formula first, put that into parentheses, and then divide by this formula. And I think I have to put these in parentheses too, this whole side as well. And for Lamar Jackson, it shouldn't have changed anything because he's played 1 game. For Matt Ryan, as I drag this down, it shouldn't change anything. It should be 77, and it is. But when I get down to Baker Mayfield, this 126 should change. And it does. It changes to 63. Joe Burrow, yeah, perfect. Should be 77.5 now. So this is right. So we've done this correctly. This is great. That's the most complex formula that we have here. So now as more games are played, as more snaps are taken, this formula is going to not only determine what team abbreviation that we're looking at, it's going to go grab that team name, it's going to use that team name to determine how many total plays they've run, it's going to look at the amount of points they've scored and their average points per game to determine how many games they've played, and then it's going to take that number and divide it by the be divided by the total number of plays that we ran and determine how many plays per game each team is running. It is a doozy. It's the most complicated formula that we're going to do. It only gets easier from here. Now, for opponent snaps, the good news is I can take this entire formula. So I'm just going to copy this entire formula, and anytime that it says B2, which is looking up Baltimore, just change B2 to E2. So I want to look up Houston now. So go look up Houston instead of Baltimore. Go look up Houston instead of Baltimore, and go look up Houston instead of Baltimore. Should be 3 spots. Did I do this right? Yeah, I did. Okay, great. There you go. So now I've got Baltimore and the team in one column, the opponent in another. And now using that, and what we've seen historically in the NFL is this tends to average out, right? And especially as we get more data on these teams. But I just want to do an average of these 2 columns, H and I, to get the projected snaps for this game. And actually, I have this wrong. So we're going to do projected snaps. I had that labeled incorrectly. But you're going to see there, 69 and 77. That averages out to be 73. So now we've got the projected number of snaps in the game that is going to be played in week 2 between all of these teams. So now we can really start to make some magic here. And I'm going to add back in my fantasy points per snap. So that's how many fantasy points per snap that each one of these players averages. And that's a pretty easy one because I think that's on snap counts. It is. Okay, so The snap counts sheet is phenomenal because it already gives you how many DraftKings points in this case, because that's what I downloaded, per 100 snaps each one of these players is going to earn. Now, Dalvin Cook, who had a great week 1 and did it on only 30 snaps, is averaging 72 fantasy points per 100 snaps. I think that's going to come down. That's definitely going to come down. But it's a starting point, and as the season goes on, these numbers will begin to normalize very, very quickly. So I just want this number. So here we go. Let's go and do another VLOOKUP. This is all downhill from here. VLOOKUP for Lamar Jackson on the snap counts tab. And when you find it, we're going to have to count a lot here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we're going to do B through N, return the 13th column when you find it. And it should be 51.9. Is that Lamar? Yeah, Lamar's right here. 51.9. Perfect. So we did that right. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to divide that by 100 because I know what fantasy data is doing is they're doing it per 100 snaps. So I'm actually just going to take it down on a per snap level. Okay. So some of these guys earn, Josh Jacobs, who had a great week in week 1, didn't do it on a lot of snaps, 0.73 fantasy points, DraftKings points per snaps. I think that's going to come down, but for the purposes of these projections, the formulas are going to remain the same. As more data comes in, it will begin to normalize. And now, because we've projected the number of snaps that are going to be run, and we know how many fantasy points per snap and the pace each team plays at, you can already create a projection here. So we'll elaborate on this projection in a second, but we can already create a projection by just saying, take the number of snaps that we expect this player to see, multiply it by the average number of points he earns per snap, and we have our number. Lamar Jackson, week 2 versus the Houston Texans, 30.1 fantasy points is the projection. And you'll see some of these are a lot higher. Dalvin Cook, 42. Do I expect Dalvin Cook to score 42 fantasy points, DraftKings points in week 2? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think that would be a little bit crazy. But even 2-3 weeks of data into the season, this really does normalize, and they start to become really, really good projections. And then once we have the projected points number, we can project value. So this is a calculation, if you're not familiar with this, where essentially it says, based on their salary, how much are they returning? So you look at the points per their price point. So here's what you actually do. You take their salary, F2, and you divide it by 1,000. So 8,200 is going to become 8.2. And then you divide their projected fantasy points by that number, and you get, for Lamar Jackson, 3.67. Now, so the way to look at this is, okay, Lamar Jackson, yeah, he's gonna earn 30 projected points, but he's 8,200. That's not as good as Matt Ryan, who's projected 25 points at $6,600. Matt Ryan returning projected 3.9 times his salary, while Lamar Jackson is only projected to return 3.6 times his salary. So this is how you compare raw fantasy points across salary points and price points to determine who the best and worst plays are. So this is a very valuable calculation as well. Now, I know for me, when I want to do a spreadsheet, when I want to have my projections, I want as much information as possible. I want to know if the opponent is any good, right? I know how many snaps they're going to run or they're going to allow, but are they allowing a lot of yards? Are they allowing a lot of touchdowns? Things like that. I want to know what the spread of the game is, what the over-under is. What is Vegas? What do odds makers think about this game? So let's add those in here. So let's do spread. Let's do over-under. Let's do, and then with that information, we can do the team's implied odds. And then we can see, I call it opponent weight, how good that opponent is. Okay. And we'll talk through each one of those, and we can actually incorporate, like I like to incorporate the opponent weight into the projections as well. Let's go grab the odds from our odds table. And again, remember, I brought over everything from the odds. I brought over literally every column. I brought over the opening data. I brought over consensus. I brought over DraftKings, Fanduel, everything else. You can decide what aspect of this you want to use. I think the consensus number is probably the best one, right? That way you're not just looking at one specific book. I think that also, you don't want to use the opening line, because as things change, like you can copy and paste this in multiple times throughout the week, and as the numbers are changing, your projections will update because the consensus information is going to be changing. So to me, that's the best one, but you can use any of these that you want. Also note that there are 2 columns here. It's game by game instead of team by team. So we have an away team and a home team in the same row. So as you can imagine, as we're dealing with vlookups, this is going to change our strategy just a little bit, but I'll show you how that's going to work. So I want to find the point spread for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens in week 2 against the Houston Texans. So as you can imagine, we're going to start with our standard VLOOKUP. We are going to do Baltimore, and we are going to look them up on the odds table. And this is going to be a long one. We're going to have to count. And I'm going to start with away team, which I'll tell you in a second. So we're going to do away team. If you find Baltimore in this array, so we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. If I'm counting right, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I might have lost it. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27 to consensus away point spread. Okay, so 27. I'm going to type that in before I forget. Odds K through AK and return 27. Nope, I might have miscounted. Let me go back and try this again. So let's do this. K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. Okay, I think I know what the issue is. They are not an away team this week. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I have the Falcons, so that's right. Okay, perfect. So I did count it right. So now what I have to do is, basically I looked up all the away teams, and that was not, I mean, half the teams are going to be at home. So what I want to do is I want to say, if it found an error, which is what this is returning, an NA, that's an error. If there was an error, do something different. So I'm going to use a formula. It's called if error. So if error says, do this one thing that I want, and if you found an error, do this other thing that I want. And this other thing that I want is going to be a VLOOKUP again. And now we're just going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it as if Baltimore is the home team. So we're going to do B2. Now we're going to do home team, and the numbers are going to change a little bit. So we're going to do home team, which is N. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22. That should be it. Home point spread, 22. I might have to check this one, but that should work. So it should be NAJ22. Let's see. Okay, it's actually 23. I miscounted, so we're going to do 23. And we're going to drag this down. And there we go. So the teams that don't have anything yet, the odds might not be out for them yet. So we have to come back and check later, but the odds aren't out there yet. So when they do get released, we'll have it. So there we go. Okay, nice. Yeah, because I know that New Orleans, Las Vegas game, that's the Monday night game. So no surprise that they're not out yet. But this is still very handy because we can continue down this road, and we can do the same thing for the over under here. We're going to have to do that same counting process again. So we're going to do, or actually I guess we'll only have to do it once. So vlookup, because the over under is not going to change whether the team is home or away. So what we can actually do is we can look up Baltimore on the odds, and we'll start away again, and we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, that might have been 27, 28, 29, 30. Let's try 31. Consensus over under. I think it was 31. I might have miscounted, but we're just going to get it. We're just going to get it in here and see if this was right. No, it was not. So let me go back and count this again. So I want to go from away team, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nope, I messed that up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Let's try 30. Consensus over under 30. There we go. Okay, so now what we do... All right, so now I should have half the teams. So now I'm going to do the same exact thing, but I'm going to just change... I'm going to do another if error, and we're going to say if error. And what I can actually do, instead of recounting all of them, I can do the same formula. VLOOKUP this. But instead of using Baltimore, use the opponent, which is in H2. No, E2, sorry. And there we go. So now we have it because one of those teams has to be the away team, right? So when you look at it that way, I don't have to go back and recount and redo everything again. Just look for the other team because the over-under of the game is not actually going to change. So we will drag this down. And now what we can do is we can do the implied total. So if you have never done this before, you can use the line and the over-under to determine how much each team should score. So we'll do, which one looks like an easy one? None of them, but we'll do this one. We'll do the Cowboys Falcons game. So you can see, yeah, they're both right here. Both are, so the Falcons are +4 and the over-under is 53.5. Dak Prescott and the Cowboys are -4, 53.5. So that means, in theory, the total score is going to be 53.5, and the Cowboys are going to score 4 more than the Falcons are. So what does that look like? Well, what we need to do is we need to divide the over-under by 2. So that's a good starting point. So that'll give us 26.75. So that's just cut the over-under in half. And then what you need to do is you need to subtract the spread as long as you divide the spread by 2. You'll see where this ends up here. So that actually says the Cowboys are going to score 28.75 on average, obviously. The Falcons are going to score 24.75, and when you add them up, it's 53.5, which is the over-under. So this is like the implied score of the game that, based on the odds, Vegas is indicating, right? 28.75 to 24.75. That would meet both aspects of the spread and the over-under, which is very handy because then you can see which teams are projected for the most points, which is ideal to know. Okay, let's talk about opponent weight, and then we'll factor that into the projections as well. For opponent weight, we have to have a little bit of a conversation here and try to figure out the best way to determine the best and worst defenses. And so I'll go to team stats by defense here. And you have to understand football is a very volatile, random game. So touchdowns are very random. It's hard to factor in touchdowns a lot. So what I'm getting at is I think the best way to determine if you have a good offense or a good defense or a bad defense is based on how many yards per play you allow. That's basically it, because that is you have so many data points with that, with all the plays being run around the league every single week, and it's much more indicative of whether you have a good, like, whether you stuff somebody at the 1 yard line is not, that's more random than it is indicative of if you actually have a good offense or not. So I'm going to use, or a good defense or not, I'm going to use opponent offensive yards per play to determine whether you are a good or a bad defense. And I think that's fair. You can use anything you want. I think that's fair. So I'm actually, while I'm here, I'm actually going to average these out because 6.2, 3.4, I don't really care. I want to know what the average is. So the league average is allowing through week 1, 5.4 yards per play. So if you allow less than that, your defense is better than average. If you allow more than that, your defense is worse than average. That's the way we are looking at this. So if we go back to the projections, let me just pull over that number, that average yards per play allowed over here. So I'm going to do a VLOOKUP. Same thing we did last time. I'm going to do, but this time, actually, I'm going to do off of opponent, right? Because I don't care about Baltimore's defense for Lamar Jackson. I care about Houston's defense for Lamar Jackson. So my VLOOKUP is going to be off of Houston. I'm going to do our thing where we translate it to the team name. So that is B to C 2, false. So I have Texans here. Okay, very good. I'll just drag it down a couple, make sure I have it right. And then I want to use that VLOOKUP to nest and say VLOOKUP for team stats defense. Go find the team name 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now the thing is with this, I need to lock this range in. So normally I would just do A through F. I can't do that this time. I want to lock this range in. So I'm actually going to put money signs around A and around F so that it always looks in this exact range, which should never change. We're never adding more teams. These numbers are going to change, but the range is not. So A through F and return 6. It's going to update me. There we go, 5.5. So now I've got all of the opponents. So this is how many yards per play Houston gives up, 5.5. Now, is that good or bad? So that's why we use the average. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to divide that number. So I'm going to put all of this in parentheses and divide that number by our average of team stats D, which is down here. I put it in F35. And again, I want to lock that cell down just so it always looks at that one cell. That one cell, it's all it's ever going to look at. And I'm going to press enter. And now I've got a weight. And the way that this weight works is 1 is average. 1.1 means that Houston allows 1% more yards per play than the league average. 1.08 would be 8% more. 1.18 would be 18% more. 7.75 means 75% of the league average, so 25% less. They're going to be a bit drastic early in the season. You know, as the season goes on, you're not going to see necessarily big swings, 25% over league average, 25% below league average. So these numbers will level themselves off. But what you can do is I like to add the opponent weight into our actual projections number. So what I like to do, we're already projecting the pace, we're already looking at the recent form, and now we're going to add in, by putting these in parentheses and then multiplying by our opponent weight, we are going to factor in if there is actually a good or bad defense that we are going up against. And when I press enter, you'll notice that not only projected points will update, but the projected value now associated with the new projected points will update. And it does. And if I drag this down, you'll see in little bits how this is all changing. Okay. It's really fun. It's really great. Again, the numbers, especially with only 1 week's worth of data, are going to be very volatile. Every single week, they are going to get better and better. It's going to get more solid is what it's going to do. It's going to be much more predictive. And you now have the ability to factor in any other factors that you want, right? I mean, there's much more data here. There's much more data on fantasydata.com. You can determine how to create these, but you now have projections that are by week, by pace, by performance, and by opponent defense, which I think is an excellent place to start and gives you a pretty nice edge. So now we only have a couple things left to do. As you can probably imagine, to update this on a weekly basis, you're only updating these 5 columns or these 5 tabs. So using the links that we used at the beginning and going to fantasydata.com and downloading the CSV files, all you do is you just paste the new data over top of the old data. As long as you paste it into A1, since we're bringing everything over, it's going to work like a charm. Same thing for snap counts. Just replace this, clear out A through N, paste it all in. Same thing for odds. You saw me do that one. You actually have a on video of me doing that. And the same thing for team stats offense and team stats defense. Just paste it in. The formulas will look to the correct columns and it will grab all that information. And then teams, you never need to touch this. It's red. You don't have to touch this one. So that's really all you have to do each week. Now, I think we should make this look a little prettier. I like to format these, right? I mean, I want to change some of my column, and you might not care about this, but I do. I want to make it look a little bit nicer. So I change my column headers here, and I want to add a bit of conditional formatting. And my favorite one is the color scales. I like to do it like this, where the green number is the high number. So whether that's good or bad, the green number is higher. That to me allows my eye to very quickly identify some of the trends or some of the things that are outliers, right? And we'll just kind of I can do this for as many of these as I want. Every single column I want to do this for. I guess I could do spreads as well. I can do all of these. Let's just do all of them. Why not? Because what I'm going to be able to do is very easily see. Look at that. Now that to me is much easier. So now what I can also do is I can add a filter to this. So when I add a filter to this through data filters, now here we go. Now we're in business, and I like to be able to see my full column headers here. So I'm going to spread these out just a little bit because now I've got that filter button on there. So I want to make sure that I can see everything on a weekly basis that I have at my fingertips. There we go. So now I can say, all right, you know what? Let's sort this by salary, largest to smallest. Now I can also, so there are going to be this, I'm glad I did that because there are going to be some, these guys don't have salaries. They might not have played any snaps yet. So what you could actually do is you can filter these out. Go down to the bottom, get rid of the nulls, and there you go. For whatever reason, if we don't have the snap percentage information or we don't have the fantasy points by snap, you won't get a projection. So I could, for example, take out all of the projected NAs. Okay, there we go. So now I've got this by salary. Well, Christian McCaffrey, let's look at him. $10,000. He plays 97% of his snaps. I project 65 snaps in this game. He's going to score 0.44 each snap. That gives him 21.4 fantasy points. Now, that also takes into account that the Tampa Bay defense allows 25% less yards per play than the team average, or than the league average. And it also, you have to consider that Carolina is one of the lowest implied total teams on the entire week. Them and the Giants, they're not even expected to break 20 points according to Vegas. So you have to consider all of that, and you have it all handy here in front of you. Or you can sort by, let's sort by value. We might get some good stuff in value here. And the first couple of weeks, you're going to see some crazy values, right? Because Adrian Peterson in week 1 had a nice game, and he did it in very few snaps. Same with Nyheim Hines, right? I mean, so you're going to get these projections where they're very sizable, right? I mean, is Adrian Peterson going to score 63 points? No, he's absolutely not. But keep that in mind that as the weeks go on, these are going to get better and better. The other thing is these are not going to account for any injuries, so you'll want to keep an eye on the news yourself. Make sure that all of these guys are going to be playing, but you can sort by, what if I just want to look at quarterbacks and just look by the most, there we go. Here's our quarterbacks, and I can very easily see some of these guys are projected. Here's Aaron Rodgers, projected for 33 points. He's almost favorable in every single thing across the board. He's going to get a lot of plays run by the Detroit Lions. They give up more than the average. He's been great, obviously, in just the 1 week. He's a 6.5 point favorite. He's in one of the highest total games of the week. It's so easy to just look through this and start making your targets for the week that it gets me all amped up and ready to rock and roll for week 2. I do think it's important to be able to grade ourselves and see if these projections are good or not. So what I'm doing now is recording this segment after week 2 to go back and see how our projections did. And remember, we were only working with 1 week's worth of data, so I would argue the worst that the projections are ever going to be after only 1 week's worth of data. So with that being said, we're still going to find out how we did, but I imagine they're going to get continually better week over week during the course of the season, just because we have more data. So I'm on the fantasy football stats and season leaders page on fantasydata.com. I'm going to just do the running backs. I think that's a good place to start. You can do any position, but I'm going to go to game, and I only want week 2 results. So we'll just do week 2 to week 2. And let's just do our running back position. And there we go. I've got my running backs here. And I'm just going to download this sheet as well as a CSV. There we go. And if I open this up, what I will actually do, and I can do this a couple of ways. I can do my rushing. I can do my rushing stats. I can look at just fantasy points. I kind of just like to look at the ranks of them. Did we get some guys that were in the top 10? Because it's obviously very hard to predict, especially with only 1 week's worth of data, the exact fantasy points that they are going to score. Now, if you do it by rank, I think that's a better indication of guys that maybe the projections were higher or lower on versus how they actually turned out here. So I'm going to do something just a little bit different. I'm going to copy. So I'll copy and paste these into our projections sheet, and I'll just make a tab called results. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this, but I'm just going to show you a very simple one here. And I'll paste these in, and then what I'll actually do is, because I'll assuming I'm doing this on a week-by-week basis, and I want to go through all positions, I don't want to rank quarterbacks against running backs and running backs against wide receivers. I kind of want to rank each position by its own. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put the designation of running back 1. So I'm going to do equals D2 and A2, and what this should do is, it'll give me running back 1, running back 2, running back 3. So this will be an easy way for me to identify what the actual rank was for each position, okay? So I have that, and then what I'll do just to make sure I have this saved is I'm going to copy it, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to do paste values only, okay? So now it's no longer a formula in here, it's actually just the text, which is good because we're going to run one of our vlookups off of this. So what I'll do is I'll go back to my projections tab. And then over here, again, you can have a permanent spot for this in your sheet. I just want to kind of have a quick look to see how we did. So I'm just going to do a VLOOKUP off of our player's name onto the results tab. And I'm going to do what we've been doing the entire time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So we're going to do B through S, 18, return column 18 when you find it, and do that. Okay, so this is very interesting. So what we've done here, let me drag this all the way down, is now I can look at our rankings versus what their actual projected rankings were. And remember, there were a couple of guys that we went through during the projections and we said, well, they have a really small sample size. Do I think Adrian Peterson's going to score 63 fantasy points? No, I don't. So again, 1 week's worth of data, especially for the guys who had success in very limited snaps, which is kind of what you're seeing at the top. Those guys are obviously being more highly valued. That will correct itself as the season goes along. But I think there's a couple of things worth noting here. While we had Kareem Hunt projected at 51 DraftKings points, which we knew was never going to happen, but it was still our third highest projected running back. And the way to look at that is to say, okay, it's week 1. There's a lot of small data, but in this small sample size, things were looking good for Kareem Hunt. He ended up being the 5th best running back of the week. Chris Carson, who I'm not sure what his pre-week 2 ranking coming in was, but ended up finishing as running back 13. Jonathan Taylor as running back 12. Nick Chubb at running back 3. We got Alvin Kamara was in our top 10, and he was one of our higher ranked, more expensive of the running backs. Finished as running back 2. Aaron Jones finished as running back 1. So, I mean, we got, in our top 15 or so at quick count, it looks like we got, 9, 10 of them, something like that. Obviously, there were a couple of guys that we knew we had sample size issues with, and I'm not so concerned about how we actually did in week 2 with 1 week's worth of data as I am just showing you how I might go about checking to see how we did on a given week. So this is how I would do it. I would rank them by position. I would then do, quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, for example, and I would easily be able to see how we're trending. And I think these are just going to get better and better as the season goes along. And then the final thing I want to show you is how to update this on a weekly basis. So now I'm recording this video September 26th, Saturday, the day before week 3 Sunday in the NFL. So I've got my sheet for week 2. Now we are going to make the transformation over into week 3. So before I do that, I am just going to clear out my grade column here. I don't necessarily need that anymore. And I am going to unfilter my position here and anything else that I have a filter on so that I can just kind of start clean. And I'm going to go through the same process, and this shouldn't take more than just a few minutes to be able to actually update this. So I'll clear out all my filters. I created a couple of filters here because some guys didn't have any plays or any data to run off of. So we had these NAs that I hid just because they didn't have any snap count information for us to work off of. But for our purposes, I'm just going to clear out columns A through E. Now remember, when I go back to the salaries tab and we import our week 3 salaries, this is what I pasted in. And that is why I reminded myself by putting in this gray box here what I'm actually going to paste in. So for now, I want to clear out name, team, position, week, and opponent. So if I go back to my projections tab, I'm going to clear out name, team, position, week, and opponent. Only the data, not the column header, only the data. I'm going to come all the way down here to the bottom, and I'm just going to delete these, or I'm going to clear them out. I'm going to hit either delete on my keyboard, or I can click clear contents. And when I do this, you should see all of the other cells that have formulas inside of them also not clear out, but they'll probably post error messages because they're looking for something that doesn't exist. And they do, and that's a good sign. Now we have a clean projection sheet again. You're going to see the magic on that shortly. So now, because we've correctly marked these tabs with yellow, those are the tabs that we know we need to go get and replace with new data for week 3. So let's start with salaries. Well, I've done a smart thing and I've saved my link here. So I can just open up that link and it'll take me to NFL daily salaries. Make sure that you are on week 3 to week 3. Okay, so now I've got this information, and make sure you're on DraftKings. That's what I wanted. And I'm just going to download this CSV. It's going to be very similar to the start of this video. Now we're going to open this one up. And here is our week 3 data compared to our, week 2 data on the left-hand side. So really all I want to do now is clear out in my projection sheets, column A through J. So I'm going to right click and do clear contents. I'm going to go back into my week 3 salaries. I'm going to copy and paste again, A through J all the way down. And I'm going to paste that into A1. Perfect. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing with snap counts. And again, I should have a link in here, and I do. I saved it over on the right-hand side. I knew that would come in handy. It's going to take me back to my snap counts page, and we've got all of our snap count information, and we are just going to download this again. It's very simple. It's not a tough task anymore. Everything has been built out. So again, clear out the data from week 2, which is A through N, and paste in our data from A through N. Copy and paste. Now that is updated. We're going to do the same thing for our odds. We'll go to the link. And now we want to make sure we have week 3, which looks like this. And we're going to download the CSV. This one's a little bit more complicated because there's a lot more data and there's a lot more headers. So again, just be careful here the first time that you do this. So I'm on my projections sheet right now, and I am going to clear out everything all the way over to DT. That's what I want to clear out. Now, the easier way to do that is probably this way, just from 17 up, because we're never going to have more games than that, right? Everyone's always playing. So you're never going to have more data down in the rows. You're just going to have a lot of data in the columns. And then I can go back to my week 3 update. I like to hold Control Shift on a PC and click right on my D-pad. It takes me all the way to the right-hand side, which takes me to the last column. And then I can, whoops, I misclicked it, but I would be able to drag it down. Anyway, here we go. Just copy everything, every single column, do a copy, bring it back into your projections tab, paste it into A1. That's it. We've done that part. Now we can do team stats defense and team stats offense. So again, same process. Open up my link. Again, this is team stats defense. And good. Okay, we've got all of our information in here. I have the full season. That's exactly what I want. So I'm going to download this. Make sure it says team stats and defense, which it does. Same thing. No surprises here. We are just going to copy and paste. And really, because there's 32 teams and there's always going to be 32 teams, you can just paste right over top of it. That'll work. If you notice, so watch our little formula right here in F35. It was 5.44 through week 2. When I paste in for week 3, it automatically updates 5.62, which is very good. So we have all of our information here. Our formulas are working correctly. That's all a good sign. And then team stats offense. So I can actually go back to that same site, that same link, make sure we switch it to offense, and now download this data. And again, always going to be 32 teams. We're going to copy that into our offense, and we are basically done here. So we've now copied everything in. We don't need to change teams. Now, the only thing we need to do to populate these projections is to remember, all we want to bring over is name, team, position, week, and opponent. So if we go back to our salaries and we copy, let me just make sure I don't bring over the headers. Okay. Everything in name, team, position, week, opponent, B through F, all the way down. Here's the magic, okay? I'm going to copy this in. Once I get down to the bottom. Here we go. Here's the magic. If we've done this correctly, when I paste these in, you should see the rest of these fields all begin to populate. Let's do it. And there you go. Look at that. Look at that. Our projections have updated. You might want to change, like that one's pulling over a few too many, decimal points for my liking, but you can easily change that. There we go. Couple quick updates. So you can mess with the decimal points, but how cool was that to see when you paste in your data, all of it pop up as you'd expect it to. You can look through, position again, all this good stuff. Now, if there are more players this week, the only thing is, let me see if we have it this week. And again, these NAs, these are going to be guys who might not have played a snap yet, things like that. So we can't project anything on them. The only thing that I would say is, let's just make sure. Okay, great. Perfect example. There are more players in the player pool in week 3 than there were in week 2. So if you see that, all you need to do is highlight the bottom row of your formulas and of your projections and drag them down. This is just going to create projections for the rest of these guys. Now, they're usually going to be your bottom of the barrel, min price guys who probably haven't stepped on the field yet, but that is to show you how the formulas work. If you need more formulas, just drag the last row down. It'll populate everything because it's all triggering off of the player's actual name. As you get more and more comfortable with this, that should take you, 5 minutes? I think it took us to update on a weekly basis, and then you can start manipulating and deciding what's important to you and looking at the matchups for the week. It's really incredible stuff. There you have it, a completed NFL projections model via the data that is available on fantasydata.com and the Premium Plus membership, which again, if you'd like to save 20% on that membership, use the promo code RickRunGood when you sign up to access that discount. I hope this was very valuable to you, and best of luck all season long.